Hi, Jahaan. Thank you so much for coming on to Everyday Endorphins.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here, Stella.
It's really fun to reconnect. And when I initially wanted to interview you, The Bachelorette wasn't even, or maybe at least not to my knowledge, wasn't even like up in the air. Like this was way before you were on The Bachelorette. So it's really cool to now be brought together again and to actually talk about this really interesting experience that you've had. So I have a lot of questions, but I want to start off by having you share just a little bit about yourself with my listeners. I know that we met at a really interesting and fun wellness showcase with Jack Taylor back in October of last year. So it's been a while, but let's talk, a little bit about your company Gainful and your founder story.
Yeah. We met last year. I think it was October, and so this was way before The Bachelorette was even on my radar. Like when I set up my goals for 2024, falling in love on national television, or trying to at least, was not on my to-do list. So yeah, a little bit about Gainful. I started it with my best friend from high school 7 years ago. We started it 7 years ago, but the idea was born a few years before that. We were co-captains of our high school soccer team, and so wanted to get the most out of our workouts and our nutrition. And of course, as most high schoolers do, we go into a vitamin store to get protein powder, and we see these crazy labels, these crazy tubs. And when you pick it up, you see the ingredient list, and it has all these scary sounding ingredients. And when you have questions to ask, the only person to ask is this other high school store clerk who doesn't have a dietetics degree and doesn't really have the knowledge or the background to help you get the most out of your supplementation or your nutrition. And so when Eric and I teamed up, we wanted to bring expert guidance to the masses. And so the way we did that was we launched Gainful, which was at the time personalized protein powder. And you take a quiz, and we would formulate a blend for each user. And not only that, we'd also give them access to dietitians to answer any questions about the ingredients or about how to use it or their nutrition. This was all done with the help of a science advisory board that came from nutrition departments at professional sports teams like the Golden State Warriors and Sacramento Kings. And so we really wanted to have this backed by science, so that we're not just doing exactly what was happening in the GNC or the vitamin shops, that we couldn't get the information that we needed. So yeah, that was 7 years ago. It's been a long journey. We still got a lot of opportunity ahead of us. And Gainful is more than just a personalized protein powder company now. It's a nutrition company for people to make the most out of their daily performance. We have a wide range of products, from protein powder to greens to pre-workout to hydration, so that people can get the most, whether it's out of their workouts, out of their work days, or just out of their life in general. And what we say at Gainful is we want everyone to make their gain, right? And we want to redefine the word gains. And there's so much more to gain in the world than just what you see in the mirror. You can gain confidence, you can gain joy, you can gain endorphins, you can gain happiness. And so that's what we want everyone to do. And we think that Gainful, and starting with your physical well-being and your mental well-being, will set the stage for you to make that gain, whatever it may be for you.
Yeah, I like that idea of like redefining what it means to gain something or like have gains. Like I used to row in high school. So I was on a crew team, and that was the first time I ever did something that was like super athletic. Growing up, I danced, I did yoga. And then after high school, I didn't continue with rowing in college. But when you kind of transition out of competitive sports, you have to redefine your relationship to fitness and to exercise. And now I'm realizing that I feel the most confident when I feel strong, and there's different ways to move my body that helps me feel strong and powerful. And I've recently started incorporating weights into my own workout routine. And I've also realized that you need to prioritize like eating and consuming protein in order to build more muscle and feel stronger. And there's so many like protein powder products on the market, and it is really hard to kind of filter through the noise. So what I really love about Gainful is that personalized component. But also, I remember when we met months ago now, and I was sampling, you were giving out products at the showcase, and I sampled some of like one of the flavors. I think it was like the cinnamon toast crunch, if I got that right. Yeah, it was so good. And it tasted really good. Like like a lot of protein powder doesn't taste that good, but yours tasted really good.
Totally. Flavor is absolutely something that we, put a lot of emphasis on. Like, other than the nutritional aspect of it, like, I feel like flavor is number two, because if it doesn't taste good, you're not going to continue to use it, and you're not going to get the most out of it. So we definitely put a lot of emphasis on flavors. And with our protein powders, You can change your flavor every day. So you can get a variety pack of little flavor sticks. The protein comes unflavored, and that means every day you can have a different flavor, so you never get bored. You can have the cinnamon toast like you had, or the chocolate, or strawberry, and the list goes on.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking Cinnamon Toast Crunch because I was thinking of the cereal. Maybe that was
Right.
a smart way.
It tastes kind of like the milk after the cinnamon toast crunch, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you decided to start this company, or at least I guess you were in college at that point and you recognized that there was a problem that you wanted to solve, how did your background in fitness and wellness and your own passions for well-being inform the desire to create this product, and also like the journey that you've had over the past 7 years building Gainful?
Similar to you, like I was an athlete in high school. I was also on the club soccer team in college, so not at the varsity level, but on the club level. And so, being physically fit, being the most out of my fitness has always been a part of my life, but it's never been the focal point. Right? I've never been an Olympic athlete. I've never had aspirations. I was never that good, but I always found that starting my day, whether in the gym or on a run, just really sets me up for the rest of my life. And I feel like when you take care of your physical health and your mental health and your emotional health, you just become a better person overall. You're a better coworker, you're a better brother or a better friend, whatever it may be. And so I've always found it as never the focal point, but that underlying current that supports everything I want to do.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I've noticed too, when you prioritize those foundational aspects of your well being, be it sleep, nutrition, fitness, stress management, like all of those daily practices, that actually, to your point, like sets you up for success for the rest of your day and the rest of your week and the month and the years ahead. And it's interesting because I think like now, the way that our world sees the wellness industry, like it's just really oversaturated with like things. And it feels like, at least in my perspective, that there's so many boxes that I need to check to be healthy, and it can feel like an overwhelming amount of information. But I think it's so important to kind of filter through all of that and come back to those fundamentals, like those basic things that you can do to take care of yourself. So like for you, is it exercising daily? Or are there other practices that you try to come back to every day that kind of keep you grounded and help you navigate the stress of daily life?
The one that comes to mind that's a little bit less mainstream, or you wouldn't think of this necessarily as mental health, but I love to play chess. It's like an opportunity. And on Mondays, I have a classical chess game, which just means a longer time format. Each side gets about 2 hours. So sometimes the games go as long as 4 hours. And it's just like a nice opportunity to step away from the world and just be focused on one thing. No phones, no distractions. You're just focused on one thing. And it's such a cathartic meditation experience of just being in that moment on that board. That's something that I really like to take care of my mental health and to balance, the stresses of life, in addition to my workouts and my fitness. There's other things as well. Like I've done like cold plunges and tried some meditation, and those things also sometimes, make me feel a lot better and are challenging too. So that's something that I enjoy.
Yeah, I'm definitely a big cold plunge enthusiast. Anyone who knows me or who follows me, I'm always in an ice bath, which I don't want to make my whole personality, because I can see why that would be like really annoying. Everyone's now cold plunging, but it does really, like for me, it's about coming back to your breath and like kind of coaching yourself through something that's challenging, and learning that you can do difficult things and you can learn how to self-regulate. That's what I think is the most impactful part of cold plunging. It's not even like the ice or the cold exposure, but it's like showing yourself that you can push yourself through something difficult. And it's similar with sports too.
I think it's like this thing called like type 2 fun. I don't know if you've heard of it before, but just like, it's a fun that during it, you're like, what am I doing this? But then after, you're like, okay, I get it. Like it's a marathon that, if you've ever done a marathon before, like the 26 miles is grueling, but then after you sign up for the next one for sure, because it's a different type of fun.
It's the endorphin high. It's literally the endorphin high that lasts. But speaking of challenging moments, navigating stress, I want to talk more about what you've been up to recently, which is being on The Bachelorette. And not to say that being on the show is stressful, but more so being kind of like a public figure and being on television and having people tune in and watch you. Like, let's dive into that. So I want to hear what even sparked the idea to go through the whole process? Like, what did that look like? What was the intention behind wanting to go on the show?
Yeah, I mean, I started Gainful when I was 21 years old. I'm 29 now. So I spent most of my 20s building Gainful. And so it just felt like now that we have like an incredible team supporting the vision that Eric and I have put forward over the last 7+ years, I felt like the perfect opportunity to put myself in a position to find love. So kind of just threw my hat in the ring, not knowing what to expect, and got the fortunate opportunity to go meet Jen and fly to LA, eventually fly to Australia with her and 17 other men. And yeah, not on my bingo card for this year, but just an incredible opportunity, once in a lifetime, and so grateful for the experience.
That I feel like really pushes you out of your comfort zone to take a huge leap of faith and to go have your love life be publicly viewed in a way. Like, how did you navigate that experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely no playbook. And I didn't know what to expect. I was just going to the experience without any like game plan. I was just letting it kind of wash over me and see where it would take me. Always with intention of being myself and making sure that the view that the world sees of Jahaan is the view that is truly me. And then that way I wouldn't risk anything bad, I guess. That being said, there's always anxiety. Like before it aired, I had no idea what they would put on air. There's a lot of filming going on, and you never know what's going to be aired. And thankfully, I have an incredible support network here, and with my family, my friends, my coworkers, and this show also provides counselors if you need someone to talk to. So even through all those anxieties, I was able to feel a lot better by talking to the people around me, people I trust and love. That was helpful, and kind of my reflection of this is like, this is not an experience that I could have done alone, and definitely not an experience that I think anyone should try to do alone, because you need the support network to kind of go through some anxieties and some scariness.
I mean, dating without having everyone watch or tune in is can already be difficult for people to manage and to navigate. Like, it's a good point that you bring up that there's support on the show or there's people that you can talk to. What were some of the biggest lessons that you learned through being in that kind of environment where it's not like a traditional dating environment, right? Like when you compare being on The Bachelorette versus maybe dating in New York or while you were building your company, like where do you see maybe some similarities, some differences? What were some things that you've learned in either experience?
I mean, there's obviously a lot of differences. Like for me personally, I'm a little bit nervous and a little bit shy, right? And so in the real world, if you're on a date, you're probably going to get at least an hour and a half of like getting to know people, get more comfortable and show yourself. And I knew that on the show, like I would only get 4 or 5 minutes on the first night with Jen. That's some added pressure, and that's just a difference and something that I went into kind of prepared for. But I think the similarities are, I can't speak for myself because I didn't make it more than a couple of weeks with Jen. But I think true love will eventually like reveal itself. And I don't know, the show's still being filmed or being aired. I'm sorry, right now. So I don't even know how it ends. But for those who make it far, I think they have enough time, more than those 5 minutes. They get the one-on-one dates and they get more time. And you also have like this incredible shared experience that it's so unique and so rare. So I think that's like one aspect that also drew me in. It's like to have that shared experience with someone, and also to like be able to watch yourself fall in love with the person you eventually marry. Like how incredible would that be? But yeah, definitely a unique experience and no real playbook. But I think the best advice that anyone could give is just to be yourself and be authentic.
I think just generally speaking, also in dating too, it's like be yourself, be authentic. And that's an interesting point that you make. Like on the show, you only really get 4 minutes to make that first impression versus dating not on reality TV. Like you can, usually a date's like the very least an hour, I feel like. I've noticed though for myself, like I can tell kind of immediately whether or not there's some sort of click or chemistry or whatever you want to call it, like pretty much within actually the first like few minutes of meeting someone. Like, is that something you've experienced too? Or when you're on the show, you only get like those first few minutes to meet Jen or to talk to her on like the first day. Do you feel like that's actually kind of enough time to get kind of a general sense of like how you feel initially towards someone?
Yeah, I think so. I've actually been like a part of this speed dating kind of experience before, and like I totally in the 5 minute conversations. So I should have been good at this by now. But definitely, I feel like if you can strip away like those nerves and like make sure you see the person for not like those first few minutes of nerves, like then yeah, you kind of know if there's a click, if there's chemistry. Absolutely.
Also, just dating in general, I think is it's just like an experience to learn more about yourself too. And like through meeting different people and like having different types of conversations, different types of interactions, it's a way to kind of reflect on like yourself and think about the kind of people that you're attracting into your life are actually like what you really want. And I don't think that's like an experience you get when you're going on to a show like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette because it's just one pursuit, it's one person. So, like how have you kind of navigated not being on the show for as long or not getting the rose, and like how is that experience for you kind of, I guess, maybe leaving earlier than you anticipated?
Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing. Like, I think that, and I said this like in an interview with one of my producers. Like, I think if it was a real world dating, I would have. I feel like I can make an actual connection with Jen. But yeah, it was. There's a lot of things going on. There's drama and there's pressure, etc. So that being said, I think everything happens for a reason. Everything happens like the way it should be. So sure, I'm a little bit disappointed, but also like I'm not here thinking that it's anything more than just an incredible opportunity to be part of Jen's journey and to kind of see if there's something there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a healthy mentality to take, like moving forward too. It's such a different experience. It's hard to compare this versus just dating in the wild in the real world. So, what were some of those lessons that you've learned from this experience that you want to implement into your own life? And like, are you going to continue to stay open to other opportunities, being on the market and just dating in New York or wherever?
Like you said, dating is so hard, and any new environment is an added challenge. And something that I'm fond of is and happy that I had the opportunity was to be out of my comfort zone. And it's like it's not something that is natural to me, being like an introvert and a little bit more on the quieter side and trying to stand out among 25 other guys. And not only that, but also trying to see if the other side of the connection is there while you're still trying to like stand out, right? And so that means you got to ask questions, but if you have a limited time, like you want to make sure you also show yourself. So there's so many different like calculus that I'm doing in my head, but yeah, just being uncomfortable, I think is like an opportunity to grow. And I feel like I've grown from that experience of being out of my comfort zone. So that's really one of the big things I'm taking away from this experience.
Dating in general is kind of taking you out of your comfort zone because there's like a vulnerability there. Like you're not sure how that connection's going to unfold, or just being open can be really difficult too. So I definitely like, I don't know if I could do a show like The Bachelor. I think personally, like it would be really hard for me to balance kind of like what you're saying. You only get X amount of time with that person. You're trying to stand out amongst the crowd, but also even figure out what the connection's like on the other side. So how did you try to stay grounded with like these competing, not priorities, but just like things that were going on in your mind? Like it's much more chaotic in that kind of environment, I can imagine, than just like dating casually, leisurely, not having to stand, like you don't know who the other person's dating in the real world. It's not like you're with them all the time, a whole group. So how did you kind of navigate like the different pressures or thoughts that were kind of going on in your mind?
Yeah, I think if I were to do it again, I wouldn't change a lot, but one thing I would change is to stop thinking so much and just trusting the process a little bit more, and trust that if the connection is there, it'll come through, like you said, in those first few minutes. And if it's not, it's not the end of the world. I think I put a lot of pressure on myself, a little bit more than I should have, by thinking about all these things and doing like math in my head, like trying to solve this problem that's completely new to me and I didn't have any playbook for. So that would be my like one thing that I would change, is to like just let it flow. And if it works, it works. If not, no big deal.
I think that's a good lesson for life in general, too. Like, we put so much emphasis on controlling the outcome, knowing how things are going to happen, like wanting to control the entire process. But really, like, I've found that the best things that happen are organic. It's easy, there's not thought really behind it, it just kind of flows naturally. And what I've also found, I don't know if you can relate to this, but in order to let things kind of just naturally fall into place, I've had to deprioritize dating in a way, like shifting the focus away from other people and into myself and like doing the things that fill up my cup. Like, I really do believe that when you put that energy back into you, it's like really magnetic and it attracts the right people and the right opportunities to come along. And not even just in dating, like with anything in life. If you want something, I think it's less about the pursuit of that one thing, but more so setting up your life in the best way possible for you and continuing to like do the things that light you up. And then there's like these synchronicities, like things just kind of click into place.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, totally.
And you mentioned you were focused for 7 years or so on your company, and then you hit this point where you're like, I'm ready to find love. I'm going to go do this experience. But as you were building Gainful, were you dating? Like, how did you navigate that? Did you feel not open to finding a partner or being in a more serious relationship? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, over the course of 7 years, there's been, waves of different, chapters in the story. And, there's times when, I feel a lot of inspiration. And so there's a lot of focus on work. And there's times when I have to be focused on work because there's a lot of challenges that we're facing. And there's also times when, I do feel like the need to step away a little bit more, focus on my personal life to date, because that's an important part of life is finding a partner, someone that makes you better, someone that makes you happy. And so it's not something that I ignored through my 20s at all. But it's definitely, there's times when I have the opportunity to focus on that. And there's times when I didn't. So just kind of understanding how those waves go and make sure you're listening to what you need for yourself first. And then also, what the company needs second. It is an important part of kind of the everyday balance that I have.
I also can imagine being an entrepreneur is really tiring and challenging and stressful, but also really rewarding. So, how have you over the past 7 years, and also how do you continue to take care of your well being as a founder and navigating a lot of pressures and a lot of different things happening at once, trying to continue to grow your company, but also prioritize yourself and your personal life and your dating life? How have you balanced both priorities?
I think it really comes down to listening to yourself. And something that I've realized through starting Gainful is in your entrepreneurial journey, sometimes the hardest thing to do, and maybe this is just a life fact, is just to be honest with yourself. And so just really pushing myself to look in a mirror and be honest of what do I need right now has been a constant thing that I'm thinking about, of making sure that I'm doing is do I need a break right now, or do I feel inspired to really put the pedal to the metal and get the most out of this opportunity that we have? So balance is of course just a key word, and the best way to balance, I think, is just to be honest of what you need.
Sometimes it's hard to be honest with yourself.
It's so hard. It might be the hardest thing in the world.
But have there been any points in your entrepreneurial journey where you've realized like I'm not being honest with myself, and has there been like a certain catalyst or something that's kind of forced you to be like, oh, I need to be honest with myself, I need to make some sort of change, or I need to slow down, and there's value to that as well?
Yeah, well, I think anytime you make a mistake, and in retrospect, or hindsight's 2020, right? If you look back and you look at the mistakes that you made in the past, usually the reason is because you weren't honest with yourself. Like, it could be as like, let's say a marketing campaign, you're like, oh, this is definitely gonna work, and it doesn't work. It was a mistake. Probably because you weren't being honest with yourself, because maybe you already invested so much time in this, and in your gut you knew it was going to work, but you didn't want to pull back, and so it didn't work. So I think that like sometimes mistakes are just the end result of not being fully honest with yourself. And of course, like we all know, like mistakes are a part of business, like, and it's part of life. Like, we make so many mistakes, but as long as you learn from them, recover from them, grow from them, like that's what's most important. And you get better at being honest with yourself because you know a little bit more.
Yeah, it's like what I'm hearing is following your intuition, like listening to yourself, even if maybe it conflicts with what you think you want or what you think is best or how you think things should look or how you think things should be. When there's that disconnect between your intuition and how you want things to turn out, I think that's what causes us to like make the mistakes, because we know maybe like in the process of being honest, we're not necessarily going to like what that outcome might be, even though it's probably for the higher good or for the best at the end of the day. And so what I'm hearing is like coming back to your intuition. And that's something that I've like had to deal with as well.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also like learning more about yourself and learning like why you are saying things to yourself, or as you grow, and you trust your intuition more, you also learn a little bit more about your intuition and learn about more about yourself and how certain things can get in the way of making the right decision, whether that's pride or something else.
Absolutely. Like those are the distractions too. Like the things that we cling on to that we think, like, for example, our ego, like our pride. It's so important to not let the necessarily drive all of our decisions and our behaviors because it can be distracting from maybe what's like intuitively right or what's best. I mean, it's interesting how, like, not just in business and dating, just like in dating and just in general and in our lives, like the more we can come back to our own authenticity and like our own intuition and strengthening that inner trust, the less conflict we feel around needing to control things because you just let things flow. And I'm wondering, like, is that a mentality that you're trying to stick to now, not being on The Bachelorette anymore and kind of transitioning back into maybe the routines you had before being on the show? Like, how you're kind of moving forward from this experience? Are you trusting that things worked out as they were meant to?
Yeah, I feel really good about where I am in life, and like I mean, there's always hard times and there's always good times too. But I think it's important to keep whatever your North Star is in sight and just keep making progress towards that North Star. And so when times are tough, you just keep moving on and keep going forward and trusting the process and letting it flow. And when things are good, it's the same thing, but it just it feels better.
I want to transition a little bit to the concept of endorphins, of joy, of happiness, which is exactly what this podcast is about. And I think we've kind of touched a little bit on these topics throughout the interview so far. But one question that I do have for you is your philosophy on happiness and on joy. And I think you have a really interesting background. Not only were you an athlete, but you're a founder. You were just on The Bachelorette. You really put yourself outside of your comfort zone. I can imagine like have experienced stressful moments in and outside of the show and while you're building your company. And I'd love to just hear, like, through all these experiences and life lessons, like, what is your philosophy on cultivating joy and how do you define happiness? Has that shifted throughout the course of your life or even recent events in your life?
The ingredients of happiness is definitely going to look different for everyone. And not only that, it's going to look different for like the same person over the course of their life. Like for me, like right now, to answer what are the ingredients to happiness for me, it's purpose and connections. And so having opportunities to have those two things combined, and I think Gainful is like a perfect example to have this purpose and this mission and have connections on not only the team, but also connections in the community and with our customer base. It makes it such a special experience. It brings me so much joy. And yeah, I think something so important in life is sharing those connections with people. And oftentimes the challenges and the obstacles that you go through with people make those connections even stronger. And, like with The Bachelorette, like I had connections with not only Jen, but also these 24 other men who went through a very similar experience, new experience, uncomfortable experience. And, that makes bonds stronger. And it's something that I really love about life, and is those connections and those bonds with the people around you.
I talk a lot about this in my interviews because this idea of connection being integral to our happiness and our well-being is like consistently talked about across all my guests too. And it makes sense because one of the strongest predictors to our well-being and our life satisfaction is the strength of our relationships. So it does go to show cultivating joy in our lives. There's many ways we can do it, but a huge common denominator, one of the most impactful ways, is through deepening our connections with other people, with ourselves. There's many ways we can do it. And when you talk about purpose, how do you define purpose? That might be a hard question to answer, but like, how do you find purpose out of what you're building, out of the way that you structure your life?
It's such a hard question, but it's like the $1 million question, right? It's like, that's kind of what we're all doing in life is like, what is our purpose? I'm not going to act like I know that answer even for myself, but sometimes like I feel like not to get too meta, but your purpose is to find your purpose. Oh man, that's a little bit too meta, but like it's also a kind of easier way to think about it is to not put so much pressure on like, oh, I need to know exactly why I'm put on this earth, like in this very moment, but to make progress towards figuring that out. That means learning about yourself and like continuing to grow. And I think over time it'll be more clear. And it's exceptionally rare for people to find that. And so even if you're asking yourself the question, like you're already one step ahead. And that's kind of a big part of what life's all about, I think.
That is kind of meta. Like your purpose is to find your purpose, but I'm thinking a little bit more about that. And it reminds me of this idea of learning to just trust the process, like the process of life, and to find enjoyment in, every experience along the way. Like every experience along the way is just adding another chapter to your book if you want to think about your life in that way, right? Like you're going to go through these things anyway. Might as well enjoy it as it happens rather than like hate it, right?
100%. Yeah. Agreed.
I think it also goes to show the power of our minds and our mindset and the way that you perceive things versus the actual events that happen. That's more impactful on your health and your well-being because I think our minds have the ability and the power to shape, how we feel, like the way that we perceive, the way that we learn from what we go through rather than the actual event that occurs because like we were talking about earlier, you basically really can't control anything at the end of the day that happens to you. So might as well just let things happen as they do and find some sort of enjoyment along the way.
And sometimes the childlike wonder of just the fact little things, right, is a good way to think about it. It's like if you were to look at certain situations through the eyes of a child, whether it's like a pretty tree or whatever, like sometimes I think I definitely forget to do that and to like look at life from just a more childlike perspective sometimes.
Yeah. And speaking of the little things, so the one question that I ask every guest that comes onto the podcast is what brings you endorphins? And I know you talked about some things in life that bring you joy and that you do that make you really happy. But if you could think about maybe like one or two things that you do every day or just something that like brings you a ton of endorphins, what would that be for you?
I mean, the obvious answer, and this won't be like the only thing, but and the physiological answer is the fitness, the exercise, and being active. That definitely is a supporting feature that brings me endorphins, no question. I think maybe going a little bit deeper than that is these connections in the communities that I'm part of that just bring me so much happiness and so much joy and feeling like I can be myself and also just feeling understood and accepted for myself brings me a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, no matter which community that is, whether that's my coworkers or my family or my friends or folks in fitness classes with me. Yeah, another area that I really, really find a lot of happiness. And having people just be there for you and also reciprocating that, being there for other people makes me so happy.
Feeling understood, feeling seen, and also knowing that it's important to have the right people in your environment that you surround yourself with that will help you grow and that accept who you are and also help you learn more about yourself. Like, I think it's so important to have quality people around that you surround yourself with to help continue to bring more joy into your life. So I love those responses and definitely relate to the fitness one. I find that the days where I start my mornings with a workout or some sort of movement, I just feel baseline better. I don't know what it is. I mean, it's probably the endorphin high, but like I genuinely feel much better when I start my morning with some sort of movement. And it looks different usually every day. So I love that response too. Jahaan, it was really such a pleasure having you as a guest on the podcast. Thank you so much for your time, for being here. How can my listeners connect with you, follow along your journey post Bachelorette, and also where can they get Gainful?
Yeah, so I can get Gainful at gainful.com. Also, we are in Targets nationwide. And then just recently launched on Amazon, and we'll have a few more retailers coming out in the next few months as well. To connect with me, you can either follow me on Instagram at JAH_AAN. So it's just my first name with a little underscore in the middle, or follow Gainful. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you today.
Thanks, Stella. Really, really appreciate it. It's great being here.